Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jonas Anund Vogel and I'm director of KTHs Living Lab. And welcome to this dialogue with...
Hi, I'm Leendert Verhoef. I'm the program lead of Living Labs in AMS Institute based in Amsterdam.
Nice to have you here, visiting all the way from Amsterdam.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, so the question is, why are we here and what are we going to talk about? We hopefully going to touch on the subject of value and impact from Living Labs. And that's something that we have in common. We both work with Living Labs. And I started my background in the construction industry and then went to academia. So the Living Lab that I've been working with is kind of based from the construction industry, I would say.
Yeah, that's nice. And I just discovered that we have this building industry in common. I worked with a lot of construction projects, but then from the solar energy side. And I was always amazed in how vertically oriented the building industry was and how hard innovation was. Can you share that experience also, Jonas? And how do you tackle that?
Yeah, there was the big frustration for me as well as a project manager that there was so many technologies, so much innovation going on in other sectors, I would say, that weren't really affecting the construction industry. So how I tackled it was I found this concept of living labs, and I thought that this would be a perfect idea to also start in Stockholm. So the idea is that by bringing all these construction industry experts and researchers together under one umbrella, we could then accelerate innovation, test new technologies and see that they actually function or not, and then increase or accelerate innovation in the built environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I always find interesting with Living Labs is that a lot of research and development already took place without the word Living Lab existing. But more and more, I am convinced that when you take Living Labs as a way of working, and you do it good, and you do it formal, then it has the potential to give better, faster results for all the participants. But it's not easy. It's hard work to reach any impact. Do you agree, Jonas?
Yeah, I do think so. I agree, but because it's of course more complicated if you engage all these different stakeholders that are kind of the core thing with Living Labs, that you want to include and not exclude actors. And then it all gets down to, teamwork, participation, that you want to share. So it's also a matter of the mentality of the participants, that you want to share results, you want to reach somewhere and not being protective about your ideas or see the problems everywhere. Potential.
Yeah, I recognize that. And what we try to do in the Living Labs in that participation is to really respect and accept that all these stakeholders are different. So if we talk about impact of a Living Lab for an industry, a company, is totally different than impact for a researcher, or impact for a citizen, or impact for the city. So this whole question of how to make impact with a Living Lab is a very brief question for a whole range of items for all those stakeholders. And I know that you've been thinking of how to structure your lab and how to start, run, and maybe end projects. Can you tell us something more about that?
Yeah, I can tell you that we were struggling with how to formulate a good process to actually reach impact. So then me and two colleagues jumped on a train and went down to Amsterdam to visit you. So it took only 20 hours by train from Stockholm to Amsterdam. It was a perfect trip. You can work a lot. You don't need to spend hours on in the airport and so on. So that's recommendation, take the train to Amsterdam. And once there, we heard how you were working with impact and got inspired by your snake pattern from start. So, I mean, I can continue if you can you tell us a bit about that first?
Oh, of course. But I know that, and maybe the audience recognize that what you have to do in Amsterdam is drink beer. So that's what we also did. And maybe now you're listening and you're drinking a beer. But yes, this snake is what we see is two worlds, basically. The world of learning, of inclusion, of social interaction, and the more hard world of project development, business plans, products, and real estate being developed. And those two worlds can be connected by a zigzag line. We call that the snake. And in several phases of that process, the one and the other groups get results. So a good impact is a business plan, but a good impact is also a very sound research paper to proceed with the knowledge in the world.
Yes, and I think that the one thing that is super important is the start of it, to build up this trust between the participants. And I think that by having a solid platform as the AMS Institute and of course KTH, you can, I mean, it's a good start to have a solid background like that. But then it gets down into the human interaction to create this trust between the participants. And I think that without this first meeting where you freely talk about your visions, your goals, and so on, and also your boundaries, maybe if it's financial or time limits or whatever, there you need to build a trust. And after that, you can start to formulate bigger questions, and you get it into agreements, and you get into how you're going to run the project. But I think it all starts with trust. Otherwise, there will be no paper and there will be no business plan or anything.
I fully agree, and I remember the little conference we organized on your initiative 1.5 years ago in Stockholm on impact. Is that actually part of the getting impact in a living lab is in participating in it. And if you don't participate, it's very hard to grasp the real values in it. And what we also discovered is the impact is a real impact when it happens outside or after the living lab activity itself. And so any living lab to make impact should give follow-up to companies, to researchers, to citizens, to really help that next step outside the lab. And in that way, it's a DNA which can work very well. Otherwise, it's just a short project which then ends when the lab closes or changes direction.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And I think that the longevity, let's say, of organizations working with living labs or having living labs, that ensures this, I mean, the spreading of knowledge. So, I mean, one project could reach a fantastic result, but then the money might be finished, or, I mean, the competence to write a paper might not be there if it's an industry project, and it might not be, let's say, go to the society if it's a totally research project. It's only in academic journals. So, I mean, to be there as a broker, kind of, to communicate and to store the results and share it with those who follow. That's also, I mean, a great possibility to reach further impact that is enabled by living labs.
Yeah, I fully agreed. And we touched upon it a little bit earlier, that impact comes in many ways. So impact can be a product or a service which you then can commercialize and earn money with. But impact can also be the capacity of an organization like a housing association to be faster with adopting with new changes and new challenges. So what we more and more see that is our network of living labs are a form of making the cities and the metropoles resilient to challenges we don't know yet. And that is also impact. So there are societal impacts which are very important, but are hard to put a number in euros on.
Yeah, but, and also, I mean, those, what comes out from journal papers and so on might be, not directly seen as an impact. It might take 10 years or so before it reaches a product. But I would say that the structure, the foundation, or having a living lab like this, also, we saw that 2019, 9 out of 10 applications to funding agencies were funded due to the fact that they were actually having a plan, that they were doing a theoretical study, they made a solid case study, a real test, and then they could have real data, let's say, validated data. And that the funding agency believed that this is actually going to happen because there is this physical structure and the organizational power behind. So I think that an impact is also that you can get more funding to cross-disciplinary research by having a solid collaboration platform.
Yeah, I fully agree. And what you have in Stockholm with your live-in lab and also in the city, it can hardly be overestimated how valuable it is to have something which is operational, where you can in a few months totally change the inside and do a different set of experiments. And when I think of making impact, it is also about on what do you want to make impact. Is it a real local scale? Is it a city scale, a national scale, or a global scale? And what those actor groups or stakeholders, they really think in different scales. Scientists think in global scales because they have to make a research paper which is new for the world. Citizens typically think of very local scales, and companies do it differently. So that's really a challenge, and I would say making impact is not an issue which is solved. If you have a living lab, it always makes impact, but you have to start at the beginning when you have built trust to really open up your deck of cards and say, impact in this project, in this experiment, in this lab, for me, that is making money with my company. For me, that is getting a better house for an affordable price, etc. To open up those cards and not play poker, but I don't know, a card play solitaire, I think. We see everything. Is that also your experience, Jonas, or do you have a different experience with it?
No, I think the same. And I think that we together with the HSB Living Lab, Emma, Sarin, and Ellen van Buren from TU Delft, and Brian Goldberg from MIT, we wrote a short paper a year ago about collaboration in living labs. And I think that that worked very well because we are open, we want to share and so on. But I have struggled with connecting with different research facilities, different projects around in Sweden and also in Europe, because you see the impact, the scale of impact, let's say, that they focus so much on the local scale and their context, I mean, and their culture. So to broadening the view is not always easy, let's say, and it's also very hard to work with administration, and that's what I always encounter. The administrative part is a bit heavy, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you touched upon trust building and energy a little bit earlier. So what we see in our academy and our master's program on city change, it is also building up skills and knowledge and experience how to do it. This is not a sort of managerial process. It has many angles to it. So, and what I also like, as what I know from it, is that the Swedish Housing Association also builds labs and tries out and puts the feet in the mud. And that's very important, because that's the only way to find out how it works for you and if it works for you.
Yeah, and here I would say, talking about your education there, because we have seen that at our living lab, we have tested many technologies, and we see that they work. They can lower the, like say, resource usage of buildings and so on. But that's not the problem. The problem is rather how you organize companies, how to take up these technologies and how to use them. And there I see a fantastic thing in your master's program at AMS. So could you say a few words about that? Because I really am admiring it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you're way beyond master's program now with your PhD, so you can teach there almost. Yeah, what I think is emerging now is that in our country, in our city, the need for people who totally look different at the way they should change cities. They learn how to deal with uncertainties. They learn how to experiment themselves. They learn how to make projects with the city. Every year we have approximately 10 groups of students who really make a living lab in the city somewhere. Really good to see. And I'm pretty sure that such a structure could also work very well in Stockholm and in Sweden. So the skill development and the putting together a number of courses you already have and add them with, for instance, city data modules already gives a different way of looking. But of course, making a new curriculum is a hard work, and sort of accreditation takes time. But even there, we started the program at AMS without full accreditation, but only temporary accreditation. It's an experiment in itself. And I think that with the educational system you have and the labs you have, that would be an interesting way to go also for industry partners to define what innovators you need for the future in your company.
Yeah. We've been thinking of how to actually get more education into our projects. And it's mainly, I would say, a resource question, that we haven't had the resources to develop that. And it's hard, but we have, this year we actually were part of 11 courses at KTH. So we're getting there a bit, I would say, from bottom up. But it would be interesting to have a whole program about smart cities and sustainable cities, and also use the city as a lab. I hope that can be, I mean, that's real impact. Of course, very hard to measure. I mean, how can you measure all the students that you have and how they start to think and what they do out in the city once they're out there, let's say. But I'm sure they make real impact.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And of course, there are ways to follow them through their careers. But maybe also looking at the program we are in this evening, it is also a matter of defining future skills you need in your workforce, and trying to then transform that to the education level and the education style you need. Is it a one course? Is it a full master's? Is it full studies? Or is it a summer school? There are many forms which you can do, but in the Netherlands more and more to make impact, you need all levels of education. So from university to very down to earth people. And that is an interesting avenue to work on. And it's not for today, but that makes impact in a few years' time. And those people come into the marketplace, they look at the world totally different than we do, where we learned it, let's say, the hard way with experience.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually admire also the HSB Living Lab is a concept with I think it's, I don't know, it's 13 companies, something like that, that's engaged together with Chalmers. And I think that, the lifelong learning process, these companies that they engage in this HSB Living Lab, that of course brings value back to them. And that's, all that start to think a bit more collaborative, to look at, complex projects, complex challenges. They of course bring new ideas out to the world and probably makes with the end goal to making it better.
Yeah, and I like also discussing this. So it is not a set a guaranteed result. It's working and hard working to create impact in innovation, because there are so many innovations in the world going on, and it's your or of a company or a researcher or a student, it's a very small part of the whole world. And when you want to do it more structurally, then there are processes to do it, and those can be described. What we try to use as a catchphrase is simple tools to help solve complex problems. So the problems can be very complex, but the process tool, how to work together, can be very simple. And that's what we try to do.
That's a good end point, I think, because now our 20 minutes are finished. So it has been an honor talking to you guys here, and have a great evening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.